people would think that, the two nation theory, those who are not students of history would think that Jinnah was the one who at least he's the one who verbalized it more and made it more acceptable to Indians. He was the one who did the two nation theory. Some who would have read a little more would say Sayyid Ahmad Khan. Shashi Tharoor says it's Savarkar. So where did it origin? Where was the origin of the two nation theory?
Right.
And where is it now? Because even now it's being talked about.
So I'll give you 4 names and 4 timelines. Shah Waliullah Dehlavi was alive between 1703 and 1762. He passed away a year after the Third Battle of Panipat, after Abdali left this country after having ravished the place and after having destroyed what I would call the spine of the Maratha Empire. Syed Ahmad Khan passes away in 1898 September. Savarkar was born in 1883. Gandhi was born in 1869. Jinnah was born later. I would say he's perhaps a contemporary of Savarkar in that particular sense, a junior to Gandhi and way junior to Syed Ahmad Khan. Savarkar was 15 years old when Syed Ahmad Khan passed away. So you must credit him with a lot of genius to say that 15-year-old boy created the two-nation theory. Right? Now, that's not possible because most people believe that Savarkar and all those people who subscribe to his point of view don't have brains. So let's assume that's not the case here, right? Now then you go to the next issue.
Please, listeners, if you are not watching this on video, Sai is being sarcastic out here. So, okay, yeah.
So Syed Ahmad Khan starts speaking of Hindus and Muslims as two races at the very least from his first book of 1858, where he traces the causes of the Bagawat, namely the 1857 rebellion. But much before that, he is educated in a seminary called Madrasa-e-Rahimiyya, which is in Delhi, which is based out of Delhi. That institution is single-handedly responsible for producing at least 7 major Islamic movements in this country. Ahle Hadith, Ahle Quran, Ahmadiyya, Barelvi and the Aligarh movement. Because all the founders are alumnus or alumni of this particular institution or have been taught by the gurus of this particular institution, or let's not call them gurus, teachers of that particular institution. And the records clearly show that they were significantly influenced by the teachings of one gentleman, Shah Waliullah Dehlavi, who passed away in 1762. So his children and his grandchildren take over this institution and are single-handedly responsible for keeping the tradition alive. It was Shah Waliullah Dehlavi who clearly said, I am perhaps a 4th generation descendant of Arab invaders. I have lived in this country, but I am not an Indian. In the sense, he says, I don't belong to this land. Obviously, the word India did not exist then, but he says, I don't belong to this land. He sees himself as an Arab. Clearly says, we cannot mix or intermingle with the local population under any circumstances. Because for 2 reasons. One, I am Arab plus I am a Muslim. So there is an ethno-religious sense of supremacism that pervades his thought process. Now we should ask ourselves, why is he so important to this entire discussion? He is important because from Deoband to every institution of repute that you can name, which is of Islamic origin, so to speak, names him as their intellectual forefather in their own records and books.
Yeah.
And I've shown it from their own books.
Yeah, I'm going to quote this. I had pointed out, I had written it. I didn't know that you're going to be talking about it, but then I had already taken it out. He said in this, which I was going to come to this about the doctrine of jihad. And in this, you've even brought Sirhindi, and he says that caused of Islam, Reformation, Revivalism, re-establish Islam in Bharat in its most pristine form through strict adherence to the Sharia and by purging of heresies such as Sufi mysticism, attendant un-Islamic beliefs and practices. You have gone into great detail about the influence of Dehlvi in your book, which is very interesting. Yes, go ahead.
So Dehlvi comes out with 2 central philosophies which continue to influence the history of this country and which influence the Khilafat movement as well as the partition of India. So he specifically says that Islam mandates and requires the establishment of a caliphate so that there is a centralized unified command, a chhatra so to speak, under which all Muslim rulers can function.
In this land?
Everywhere. He says a caliphate, a unified caliphate, and it starts with Bharat. because this happens to be the biggest possession in their hands. Okay, that's one. Second, he says, along with the caliphate, which will take care of the worldly affairs of Islam, you need a very strong ulama. So there's a very clear division of turf between the ulama and the rulers. He makes that. And it is the job of the ulama to set the Islamic house in order if the Islamic king strays. So he draws on all of that. And this man was a contemporary of Abdul Wahhab. Both of them learn the hadith from the same school and from the same set of teachers in Hejaz. Okay, so look at how the history. I mean, the history of this particular period is incestuous. We read the history of Wahhabism as if it's in a separate silo when it comes to the Middle East, but we don't wish to talk about what happened parallelly in Bharat.
He's the one who translated the Quran into
Persian. Correct.
So that
why did he do that? Because by then Persian has become the official language of the administration under the Turco-Mongol Persianized Mughals. And therefore, he says, the first thing that we must do is, as long as it is in Arabic, it becomes difficult for the local population to read the language or read the book. And they'll be contaminated by the influence of their Hindu ancestors and Hindu neighbors. So to prevent that infestation and contamination, let's say of that particular pandemic or epidemic as he saw it, let us quickly convert this into a language which is more accessible, and therefore he was the first one to undertake the translation of Quran to Persian from Arabic. So this happens. Not just that, he is also crystal clear in his head that the only way I can ensure that the new convert remains true to Islam as it was followed by its earliest followers is by ensuring that their entire life is lived in accordance with the Sharia, because Sharia reflects the religion in the manner in which it was followed by the earliest followers to Islam. This is how they see it. And that philosophy is endorsed across the board. There is a multiplier effect with multiple institutions mushrooming all over the country. If you look at the map on the cover page of the book, I've identified those regions which have been either influenced by this thought process or which are epicenters of seminaries which propagated the thought process. So when you have Dehlavi already saying this, Syed Ahmad Khan, who is a product of this, what are we talking about here? Why is Savarkar even relevant to this discussion? Jinnah is merely a third or fourth generation torchbearer of the very same thought process. But this also shows that Dehlavi is perhaps a strawman argument to make, because if someone who is so much trained in the religion and its scripture and has done this for a living, whose father compiled what is known as Fatwa-e-Alamgiri under Alamgir Aurangzeb, clearly and surely he knows more about Islam than you and I do. So I wouldn't say this is merely the contribution of Dehlavi. Dehlavi was capturing or encapsulating a political doctrine based on Islam. So ultimately it goes back to the central book, the root book. So one of the founders of Jamia Millia Islamia, which was founded I think in 1920, the backdrop of the non-cooperation movement, after they found Aligarh less Muslim. Aligarh Muslim University was found to be less Muslim and more British loyalist, and therefore Jamia was established. One of the founders was Sayyid Shabir Usmani. He gave the first Quranic justification for the creation of Pakistan on the basis of the division of the world between the Kafirs and the Mu'min. And you'll find a better exposition of this thought process in Venkat Dhulipala's book, Creating a New Medina, where he speaks of the period post-1937 until the creation of Pakistan. With all this before us, I refuse to believe that Savarkar or even Jinnah or even Syed Ahmad Khan was remotely responsible for this. They were only taking a certain thought process forward. That's it.
Did they, were they the ones who, or one of them or two of them, were they the ones who gave a kind of a politicalization?
100%. Yes. So, which is why I would say, so the first person to give it a very concrete political shape was Sayyid Ahmad Sarhindi, who existed in the period of Akbar. But because Akbar existed, and he was a powerful emperor, and the Mughal Empire was perhaps at its peak. I would say it was perhaps at its peak under Aurangzeb in terms of geographical expanse and all that. He did not find too much of traction. And since everything was going hunky-dory for political Islam, people didn't see the need to indulge him. But when the chips are down for political Islam, the ulama take up the mantle. And therefore, from the death of Aurangzeb in 1707 is when you start looking at the rise of political Islam under the guidance of ulama. JUI is also established.
Why were they not influential during Akbar then?
So it's like this. When people believe that under a particular Islamic king, the flag of Islam and the flag of Mughals are flying high, let's not upset the apple cart, so to speak. And plus, Akbar was a very powerful emperor. So, in the tug of war between the religious elites and the political elites, when the political elites are very powerful, religious elites are not going to find too much of traction from the public, because they'll say, this man has ensured that Islam reigns supreme politically in this country. So, why would you want to go around troubling him at this point? But subsequent rulers end up getting even colorful titles like Rangila, Muhammad Shah Rangila, so on and so forth, right? Thanks to their lifestyle and everything else. That's when the religious elites say, at least now you must listen to us. So compared to his father, Abdur Rahim, who lived in the time of Aurangzeb, Shah Waliullah Dehlavi lived at a time when the Islamic rulers were only Islamic in name and were happy doing or indulging in all sorts of debauchery. That's when he invites Abdali to invade this country, because Marathas and Jats have reasserted their position. So he writes letters to 3 different people, the Nizam of Hyderabad, I think the Emir of Afghanistan in Herat, and then also perhaps, I don't know if he wrote to Turkey, then he writes to Abdali. Abdali is the one who comes here. So this tells me that the two-nation theory is not a product of the 1900s, it's not a product of the 1800s, it's a product at the very least of the 1700s, going back to, I would say, the root cause.
The root cause. Okay. You've talked about the Dehlvi influence. Tell me about the Wahhabi influence.